What's up guys, thanks for tuning in to another Life by Cars video. I'm Nick, this is my E92 BMW 335i, and today we're going to be continuing along a topic that I started in last week's video, where I was talking about the general checks I do to ensure the health of the car. Today we're going to be taking that to the next step, and we're going to talk about the different things that you need to do and change prior to tuning this car. So it's no secret that the E92 BMWs with the N54 and the N55 engines kind of introduced the 3 Series into like the real true tuning world. When the N54 first came out, people found out that it was able to make way more power than it came with stock. There's people pushing stupid power numbers with those things. So if you're going to start venturing into that world and pushing those power numbers, there are a set of key engine maintenance items that need to be taken care of. If you don't do these things before tuning your car, you are going to run into problems with your tune. We're going to dive into it a little bit more, but you really just want to make sure your car is in the best operating condition as possible before you start pushing that power. Now you might be able to tell that I'm wearing the same clothes from last week's video. I was filming in the same spot. The car is just as filthy as it was last week because I haven't gotten to wash it yet. So just bear with me. I'm trying to do a couple videos in a day here to get back on track, make sure we can get you guys content each week. So let's dive into it, and the first thing that we're going to talk about that you need to do is the most obvious one. It's the most basic one. You need to change your oil before you tune your car. These engines can be pretty particular with how the oiling system works. For example, there are extremely tight tolerances in a lot of the different components of this engine, just the way BMW builds them. For example, the rod bearings, the tolerance for the oil to get in between those bearings and the journals and of the crank and all that sort of different stuff is extremely tight in there. So your oil needs to be in good condition in order to be able to get into those tight spots and lubricate them properly. When you're running extra power, you're going to be putting additional stress on those components, and you need to make sure that they're able to handle it and that oil is there to keep everything operating as it should. So if you know much about these E92s, you're going to see here that this is the N55 engine that came in the later E90, E92 335i's. The majority of the E90 generation 335i's have the N54. I'm going to make a separate video talking about the big differences there. The most obvious one is the N54 is a twin turbo setup. BMW calls the N55 twin power, but really that's a single turbo that has a twin scroll on it, so it's just one turbo on the N55 here. The things that I'm talking about in terms of tuning are going to cover really N54 and N55. When there are key differences, I'll call them out, but really this applies to both of these engines on this platform. Let's pop this engine cover off to talk about the next couple things. So the first extremely important things you're going to need to do when you're tuning the car is sitting right down in here. You're going to need to change out your plugs and your coils. So these cars with these engines in stock format, but especially when they're being tuned, are known to have misfire problems. They're known to break up under high power, high load, high boost, all that sort of stuff. So you need to change out your spark plugs and your ignition coils way more often than you would on like your normal, just average commuter car, or really a lot of other cars that you're tuning. For some reason, with these engines, it's one of the key aspects of tuning. Now that does apply a little bit more to the N54. The N54 is a bit more problematic when it comes to the misfire problems, but the N55 certainly can have very similar issues. With the N54s, depending on what tune you're doing, you definitely want to consider doing a 1 step colder on your spark plugs when you replace them. That just helps them operate better under those high boost, high compression situations. On the N55s, I could be wrong on this, but I believe from factory you already have a colder set of plugs, so you don't need to worry about that too much, maybe unless you're doing some sort of crazy tune. So I haven't run into any issues personally with tuning my N55 and needing to get colder spark plugs, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. With the ignition coils, there's different brands that are recommended. Some are recommended as being better than others. Do a little bit of research online. You'll see 2 or 3 main brands. You usually don't ever buy the OEM BMW ones. Again, you go with a couple different aftermarket ones. So check out the different options for that and do some research to see what's best for the tune that you're putting on your car. Another thing that we'll talk about in this area is you'll see right here is you have a fuel rail, and then you have these high pressure fuel lines that go right down into here. And that's because these N54s, N55s are direct injection engines. So basically what it means is the fuel is injected directly into each cylinder, and it's injected in there under very high pressure. The car has a separate high pressure fuel pump pump, and it has very special injectors that are able to deliver that fuel at a high rate under high pressure. Now, this topic is going to be more important for N54 owners versus N55 owners. BMW kind of worked out some of the kinks when they came out with this engine, so this is not really a concern. But with the N54s, there are 12 versions of those injectors, those fuel injectors that go down into the cylinder. There are 12 versions of it. And the reason there are 12 versions is because they just couldn't get them right. They couldn't get them to be reliable. A lot of them will start leaking, and when you start getting leaky fuel injectors, then you start mixing oil and fuel. Your oil starts to thin out. It creates a bunch of problems. You're not going to be getting the right fuel pressure into your cylinders. So obviously that's something that needs to be operating really well before you're pushing those power numbers. If you're not getting enough fuel into your cylinders and your timing's advanced, your boost is up high, you're going to create a potential situation that's harmful to your engine. So definitely, if you're looking to tune your car and you have an N54, make sure your injectors are in good condition. If they're not an index 12 injector, which is the best version, which is the final version and finally the best, most reliable version of injectors for the N54 engine, if it's not an index 12, you're gonna wanna consider potentially maybe needing to do that. It is a bit expensive, but really when you compare it to potentially damaging your engine, it's definitely worth it. You really need to do that before you tune the car. Next piece we're gonna talk about is also under the hood, and it's underneath this piece here, which is the intake manifold. So right under there, you have the 6 intake ports on the side of the block for the engine. You would if you take off this intake manifold, you'll be able to see all the valves and whatnot. And I'll post a few pictures here in the video of what the valves and what the intake ports of my N55 engine look like. But because this is a direct injection engine, as we just talked about, that basically means that there's going to be potential for carbon buildup on those valves, on those intake ports. If you do some searching online, you're gonna see some pictures of some N54 engines that are completely caked up in that area with just massive amounts of carbon. And if you have too much carbon in there, that's gonna create another possible potential situation where you're gonna be misfiring, you're gonna be breaking up, and you're not gonna be able to make power and get really the air into the engine that the engine needs. This is, again, a problem that's way more prevalent on the N54 engines than it is on an N55. As you'll see on the screen, my intake valves are relatively clean. There's definitely some carbon buildup there that I'm going to address at some point, but when I last had that intake off, when I was doing my oil filter housing gasket, it was not too bad. I only at the time had just over probably 50,000 miles on the car, so not really high mileage. You can see there is a little bit of buildup there, but if you have an N54 engine, they are way more prone for that buildup. It's going to happen a lot faster, and it needs to be addressed more often. The way you address it is you take off that intake manifold and you get in there. The official way is walnut blasting it, which is the process of blasting in under pressure walnut shells, crushed up walnut shells, and that'll go in there and take out that carbon without damaging the valves or the intake runners or any of that. But there's also ways that you can do it yourself if you don't have that special equipment and you don't want to buy it. There's ways of going in there with different cleaners and being able to slowly scrape that carbon out. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing at some point once I get a little bit more mileage on this car, to take care and clean up mine. And I'll definitely make a video of it when that time comes, but for the time being, there's a ton of other resources out there that you can look into. So that covers a lot of the key engine pieces that you need to replace as a maintenance item on this car before you tune. Next, we're going to talk about some parts that need to be replaced and upgraded before you do that, and it starts with the charge pipe. So right down here is where the charge pipe is, and you can see I have a metal charge pipe in here that has a rubber coupling on the end here. This is an Evolution Raceworks aftermarket charge pipe. The charge pipes that come on these cars from factory are just absolutely trash. They are plastic and they are known to blow off even at stock boost levels. Basically what happens is all the pressurized air from your turbo gets sent over through that charge pipe before it's fed into the engine. So it's holding in a lot of PSI, a lot of pressure, and even at stock factory boost levels, those are known to blow off and break. So that is absolutely something you need to upgrade before you do a tune. If you tune your car and you still have your factory one on there, I can almost guarantee you that within the first week, you're gonna blow that charge pipe off. And that happens because the boost levels are higher, there's more pressure in there, and it's just gonna pretty much explode, and you're gonna go into limp mode and kind of not really be able to drive the car. But the charge pipes are really easy to take in and out. As you can see, you really just need to take off your air box to be able to get access to the area. and you take off some connections from the stock one down here that come up off the intercooler. You take out this bolt, and then there's really just a C-clip up, down, and back in there that attaches the opposite end of the charge pipe into your intake manifold. It's very simple to do, very easy. The next and last thing that I'm going to talk about in this video is making sure that your temperatures are staying down as much as possible. These engines, these turbo engines, N54, N55, they run extremely hot. Any turbo engine really is, because you're creating a lot of heat from that turbo. The hot exhaust is going through the turbo, and that turbo is compressing air, which also heats air up. So it's just kind of the nature of it. But these engines run hot, and the stock intercooler is not designed to cool down that compressed air from the turbo properly. I believe there are certain stage 1 MHD off-the-shelf tunes that you can buy and put on your car with the stock intercooler. They don't recommend that you ever run the stock charge pipe for the reason that we talked about before, but I think there is one tune that's designed for stock intercooler. I really wouldn't recommend doing that. The stock intercooler is very restrictive. It does not cool down that compressed air very well, and you're going to see your IETs rising very, very quickly after doing a couple pulls with that stock intercooler. So you might be able to see back in there the fins of the intercooler. That's where it sits, right in the front. You'll see that mine are black. The stock one is typically silver like that. That's the AC condenser that you're looking at now through the front grills. And my fins are black down on the bottom here because I replaced it. I got an aftermarket unit before I tuned my car, and it really helps keep those temperatures down, helps making sure that the IETs aren't going way too high. So guys, that about covers everything that I wanted to go over in terms of the mechanical pieces that you need to look into before tuning your car. Now, this should be used in conjunction with the video I released last week where I talked about some of like the general maintenance things relating to oil leaks and stuff like that you should be on top of with your car. So those things that I talked about in that other video should definitely be part of the consideration, definitely be taken care of before you even get to the things that I talked about today. You really just want to keep in mind that when you are tuning your car, making more power, you're putting a lot more stress on certain components. Things will be more prone to break, and things will be, if they're not operating perfectly before you tune, that is going to show up faster than it would if you were just leaving it at stock power levels. So these cars can be reliably tuned, and I've been running a tune on my car for over 10,000 miles at this point, and it's been great. It's been perfect. Haven't run into any issues. I do run a pretty mild tune right now, so that helps. But really, even if you're pushing like stage 2 plus tunes, it can be done very well. You can make significantly more power, but you need to be aware of these things. You need to stay on top of them. Make sure that the core bones of your car are working properly first. Do your maintenance first and your mods second. So that's gonna be it for now, guys. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you guys are out there having fun with your E92s, your BMWs, whatever it may be, whatever you drive. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Reach out to me on my Instagram if you have any questions. Drop a comment below as well. But thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.